We love our dogs, don't we? My brother John has an American bulldog named Reggie, and in keeping with the dog's name, he treats him like a king. Wouldn't you be shocked to find that God is a dog? In a recent comic strip, Bizarro, this is the take of the cartoonist on God's nature. In this particular strip, the newest arrival in heaven stands before God's throne, stunned to discover that the divinity is four-legged. And God asks, "The joyful, loving, eternally forgiving nature of dogs never tipped you off?" Indeed, all these qualities characterize God, but the one I want to focus on is God's eternally forgiving nature. God instinctively wants us all to be clean of sin. And you could say that like a mother dog or cat that licks its newborns clean, God licks us clean. Have you ever known a neat freak? My Aunt Mary was one. Though how she managed it with 5 kids, I don't know. Her house always looked clean and tidy. God is even more of a clean freak than my aunt was in her heyday. Our Father is completely set on his kingdom being clean. And that can happen only if we, his children, are clean. All that God needs from us is the smallest opening to be cleansed. The openness that Zacchaeus demonstrates in today's reading from Luke. Brothers and sisters, may each of us be sure to provide God with such an opening. This chief tax collector in Jericho demonstrated that openness through his curiosity about Jesus. Clearly, he had some knowledge of him, perhaps having heard about the 10 lepers that Jesus had healed, or the sight that he had granted the blind beggar. 2 miracles recounted in the chapter of Luke that precedes our passage today. Because Zacchaeus' occupation made him unclean, he was excluded from worshiping in the synagogue with his fellow believers. Tax collectors were considered thieves because their penchant was to collect more than was owed. That's how they made their income. And as collaborators with the Romans, well, they were detested because the Romans had conquered Israel a century or more before and were just horribly, horribly resented. Might this rich tax collector have longed with all his heart to shed his condition as an outcast and be accepted by his fellow descendants of Abraham? Because basically he was isolated from them. Maybe climbing that tree signified he was open in even the smallest way to being cleansed of sin. Clearly, that's how Jesus interpreted his action. "Zacchaeus," Jesus called out, "come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." The Lord called this man by name. Whenever Jesus does this in the Gospels, his purpose is to give life to the one he calls. "Follow me," Jesus says to Philip and to Matthew. "Simon, do you love me?" he asks. "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" "Lazarus, come out." "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things." "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Jesus calls their names to heal and forgive, correct and guide, challenge and invite, console and raise from the dead. For the same purposes, Jesus calls your names and mine to give us what we need so that we may have life. On our part, all he requires is the slightest opening. My friends, Jesus is calling our names. He knows us. He knows what we need, just as he did Zacchaeus. As the tax collector responded eagerly, let us do likewise, allowing God to cleanse us as a dog cleanses her newborns, to cleanse us of whatever the sin is that bedevils us. He calls our names to assure us that all is well, no matter the pain that afflicts us or the burden weighing us down. How critical it is that we, having been called, having been granted mercy, also extend that sort of mercy of Jesus to others. Having cleansed Zacchaeus, the challenge Jesus presented the people of Jericho was to embrace this man as one of their own. Whom in our life is an outcast like Zacchaeus, who needs our forgiveness and an embrace from us? Eager though God is to cleanse us from sin, without an opening from us, without an assent, God's hands are tied. You know, Zacchaeus had a choice. He didn't have to go outside that day and climb a tree. He could have stayed home and ignored Jesus' coming altogether. We must constantly seek God out by means of Eucharist, the sacrament of reconciliation, daily prayer, and our use of the Bible. Then, having received God's mercy, having been strengthened by such means as these, we are to apply to others the mercy of God by feeding the hungry, ministering to the stranger, praying for those who suffer, bearing wrongs patiently, and all the other corporal and spiritual works of mercy. Jesus constantly is calling our names, offering each of us what we need, and cleansing us like a dog her newborn pups. Let us listen, and then, with the grace given us at this sacred celebration, let us serve as Jesus' instruments to meet the needs of our suffering brothers and sisters.